For those of us who've joined us in Napa before, you know the Beta SMB Institute Leaders Forum is special. It's a special location, a special venue, and best of all, special people. We pride ourselves on curating an A-list of attendees, the best and brightest leaders of our $500 billion plus business to small business marketplace. And every day we are adding speakers, workshops, and special events to this intimate forum, all of it highlighting the shared challenges and opportunities in a setting that drives casual and candid exchange. Join us at the 2022 Beta SMB Institute Leaders Forum, May 11th and 12th in Napa, California. Tickets are on sale now at betasmbi.com/leadersforum22. Hey, good day, everybody. Dave Walker here again. And in our continuing series talking about how we help small businesses think bigger. And we're going to unpack that a bit with these two guests because I wanted to get the perspective on small business growing bigger from two sets of voices that we don't necessarily hear from all the time in the context of our community that we're hearing more and more from. First and foremost, from influencers. Those folks who are actually talking to, in many cases, millions of small businesses every single day, and have become such a vital partner to small businesses over the course, especially of the last 2 years. And we have one of the best here, one of the biggest and one of the best, and his name is Michael Haynes. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about yourself in a second, but I also wanted to introduce another very important voice. A director at Next Street, which I hope many of you know who Next Street is. They are just an amazing agency that really deals with advocacy organizations, helps brands interface directly with advocacy organizations. And that's Jocelyn Walters. Jocelyn, welcome.
Thank you, Dave. It is also a pleasure to be here. Nice to be with you as well, Michael.
Yes, thank you.
So why don't we just start with the ubiquitous introductions of who you are, what you do, what you think your mission is as it relates to small business. Jocelyn, let's start with you.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I am a director at Next Street. Next Street is a mission-driven firm. We focus on building the modern infrastructure for America's small businesses, and particularly those that are systemically held back. We partner with corporations, investors, governments, financial institutions, all sorts of small businesses and those that serve small businesses. And what we do is we provide them with the types of solutions they need in order to help small businesses with the right resources at the right time. And so we are doing that through capital solutions. We are doing that through programmatic solutions like technical assistance and education. And we're also providing corporations and brands and others and governments with the strategy they need so that they can come up with a solution that hits their mission and serves those that they seek to help in the small business community.
It's awesome and awesome work. You guys are, we met you through your significant partnership with Verizon Business and LISC, and have come to know you in so many different common touch points, basically, that our community has with the folks that you represent. Michael Haynes, how about you?
Thank you. So my name is Michael Haynes. So I'm an SMB business growth specialist. My company is called Listen, Innovate, Grow, which is a consulting firm. And so my focus and passion is about working with the CEOs and business owners of small and medium, predominantly service-based businesses that are looking to acquire and retain and grow business clients. So I very much am your SMB B2B specialist. I'm based down here in Sydney, Australia, but I do a lot of work with SMBs in Canada, the United States, and here in Australia as well. My focus and passion is really all about helping those business owners and leaders to take a buyer-driven approach to being able to be successful in the world of B2B, because I truly believe B2B is the key to being successful and building the lives and having the impact that SMB companies and their teams seek to have.
And I followed you for a while as a member of Entrepreneur Magazine's advisory board. I can't remember what exactly it's called, but you've been a frequent contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine and really carrying forward that mission of yours.
Yes, so I do a fair bit of podcast speaking and writing in various publications. And I think it's actually through another influencer, Brett Trainer's, how we actually came connected after being on his podcast.
Yeah.
which is focusing on B2B growth.
Well, I appreciate you both being here. I think that this is a question that I certainly have come to ask frequently over the course of the last 2 years. It's kind of variation on how's it going, but from your two perspectives, Jocelyn, starting with you, just broadly talk about the last 2 years and what you've observed from where you are has been going on with small business. And please, I know that's a big question with lots of stuff to probably unpack, but feel free to really kind of talk about from your perspective, what are the most important things that have happened with small business over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think one of the most important and critical things that have happened is the visibility on small businesses that the pandemic and the economic shifts, as well as the racial focus, has shown a light on. And that has been critical for small businesses that were not really being paid attention to. I read an article, and I can't cite from where, but it was an article that talked about the fact that we never really recovered our small business loss from the 2019 recession and some of those periods where we lost so many small businesses out of the economy, and there wasn't this mass response. And I will say that as tragic as COVID has been and the pandemic has been on so many people, it did cause a lot of focus, both from consumers as well as governments and others, to pour into small business. So we know that corporations made a $66 billion commitment to racial equity, and a big portion of that was funneled through to small businesses, or at least earmarked for small businesses. We're still seeing where the commitments are coming through. The government also made huge commitments to small business through PPP and other resources. And then you have the actual boots on the ground, like the CDFIs and the small business solution organizations that were being resourced and supported in ways that they had never been before. Mm-hmm. Now, while that's good, there are infrastructural problems that are still not solved, and in some ways being band-aid. They're being band-aided, if I'm making up words. So mm-hmm. They are being covered up in a way that ultimately needs to be fixed. And this is why Next Street focuses so much on this idea of the small business infrastructure, because if we don't iron out some of those underlying challenges, we are holding ourselves back as an economy, because small businesses fuel our economy in the United States particularly, and I'm sure this is true in other countries as well, that without the small business infrastructure, you're really holding your whole country back, your whole economy back. And mm-hmm. So many people work for small businesses. Not only do they work for small businesses, but that funding, that money that's going in and through small businesses is the livelihood of our citizens, and also funneling into the government and other places that we need. And so if we can't create an infrastructure that is really inclusive and accessible, we're just not able to thrive as a country economically the way that we could if we just freed up some and remove some of the barriers that currently exist. So again, the main issue is, or the main benefit to this current situation, is the visibility. The main challenge is we have to fix the actual infrastructure, and it may not just be money and creating a program. It's infrastructural change that needs to occur.
There's a ton there that I want to circle back on, and all very important stuff and unpack. But Michael, from your perspective as an influencer, what have you seen over the course of the last 2 years?
So great question, Dave. So it's been interesting. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I think most SMBs, irrespective of where I was liaising with them, Australia, Canada, US, like everyone, trying to really find their feet, try to figure out what they're going to do. It was all about survival. So there's all of that during the first 6-7 months or so. Then everyone started being in lockdown, working from home. And then I think everyone was listening to all the experts about putting out content. And so lots of content went out online, and a barrage of content. I call it content vomit, because there was just so much of it. Webinars, white papers, articles, live streams, you name it, it was all going there. And it was creating a lot of overwhelm for small business leaders, which is something I was recognizing intuitively from my discussions with SMB leaders and owners. Then Gartner did a study which confirmed that over 55% of B2B buyers are overwhelmed with so much content. 45% of them are confused because one expert says do one thing, another expert says do another. And what SMB leaders, the leadership teams, CEOs are looking for is some what I call AIR, advice, insights, recommendations on the roadmap on how to move forward. But they were just getting bombarded with lots of content, but not really giving them that clarity, that focus, that direction on how to move forward. So saw a lot of that. Saw a lot of people also, a lot of businesses trying to go online, because that also was the big thing that was saying, go online. You know, online is going to be the be all and end all. And that's problematic because for some businesses, you know, I'm a knowledge-based business, being a strategic consultant, advisor, and educator. For other businesses, like across the street from me, are physios and cafe, and not easy for them to pivot and go online. So it was this kind of very one catchphrase, pivot, go online. No serious direction on how to do so, because it's a lot more than just having a website. There needs to be a strategy around that. Now I'm starting to see, now that we are kind of coming out of it now, there is a big focus on a lot of SMBs wanting to move forward because the PPPs in the US, Job Seeker, all those fundings, which, you know, kind of help to kind of keep survival, started to peter out. Now a lot of business owners want to know how to move forward. So they're looking for those new growth opportunities, how to take the businesses forward, how to restart their businesses. They want to connect with subject matter experts, advisors, and their peers, and really trying to move forward and really try to navigate how they're going to go from 2022 and beyond. So we went from survival. Now I see very much as a focus around moving forward. Some want to have sustainable, profitable businesses. Some do want to grow as well. But it's all really about moving forward and figuring out where are the opportunities and how to best go about doing so.
Great summation. And Jocelyn, I guess springboarding off of what Michael said, are you seeing, particularly in minority communities, those that were, I think, better described as simply underserved and underrepresented in the small business economy, are those businesses back on footing where they can think about not just surviving, but actually growing? Or, and as part of that, they can think about it, but until there are systemic changes, basically, that you described, it's not really going to work. So they can have big dreams and big ambitions, but until really, for instance, we learn how to do a better job with credit worthiness for minority-owned businesses, it's the process of establishing credit is so just wrong. How do you view it? How do you think that those small businesses are viewing the world right now?
Yeah, I would say that the short answer is no, they don't feel that they're on sure ground just yet. In fact, some of them fell all the way off, so there isn't really a recovery that comes from this visibility and this new influx of, you know, as Michael talked about, the noise of content and even the funding, because they were already on such a thin thread before the pandemic. So in some ways, I think, again, there's a lot of hope and inspiration that has come through for people who are either starting new businesses. So we did see a lot of new businesses start, particularly at certain points. There was a matching of Black and Latino businesses to white-owned businesses being started, which hasn't been seen for the last 25 years. So Black-owned businesses and Latino-owned businesses were starting up in the 2020 or so year, 21 and 22, at a rate that was matching white-owned businesses just being started. That's a fantastic outcome or situation. At the same time, they struggle to get approved for loans at the same rate as their white peers. They struggle to get the right resources. And so there isn't, you talked about the structural imperfections, those have not been addressed in its scale or in any level of depth to truly level set or create that ground, that firm ground that you spoke of. And there are a lot of things that I'm seeing now that might help. And this, again, to Michael's point about the content overload, some of the partners we're working on now are starting to think a little more nuanced. Let's not just create a program for everybody and try to put our name on it and see how great our brand is, but perhaps we want to work on female construction owners, business owners in the state of Texas. Let's just do that really well. And that way, those people can hear the message that this is something specifically for them and go seek that out instead of catch-all programs that are, just large. Not that those can't exist. They exist and they do well, but I could see where some folks that are trying to support small businesses could look at it from a more nuanced standpoint. There is a lot of ecosystem work that we're involved in. We've done ecosystem projects across the United States, and those communities of ecosystem builders are trying to say, okay, here are the initiatives that are taking place in our community that need some help shoring up and filling in gaps. So they really earmarked exactly what things could use the help to move the needle forward. And it would be great to see more investors and corporations and those that have resources tap into it at that level so that needs are being met at both the stratosphere as well as the more close to the ground level where the business owners actually are. There are a lot of business owners who are like, we see all these articles about all this money coming, but we don't actually see it or feel it. And so that's where I think something could really help, especially in the communities that are left out. And so that can be left out from a racial standpoint, left out from gender standpoint, left out from economic standpoint, veteran-owned. There's so many of these groups that have, for specific reasons, not been able to access the opportunity to grow their business. And that's what we should be solving for so that all of us will actually do better and thrive.
The use of the word nuance, I think, is so critical. And I know, Michael, you've written about this. In your experience of working directly with small business, is it really all about the nuance? Is the help really all about that kind of that focus, that almost customization to the unique needs of that particular small business?
Yes, it is. I think Jocelyn's raised a number of points that are to expand upon. So where to start to first? From my observation from talking with SMB leaders, and again, I focus a lot with the SMBs working in the B2B space, but there is a common theme in terms of businesses that want to move forward, whether they want to have a sustainable business or growing business. The key question I'm continually getting is they're looking for those new opportunities and where to focus on. What industries, what markets, what customers should they serve? That is the big question for business owners and leaders. And I find for a lot of SMB owners and leaders, they don't know how to undertake that exercise of identifying those market opportunities, those customer opportunities. So Jocelyn has raised a very important point around education and the education around those business fundamentals around what I call business innovation. So how do you make those changes and improvements in your business and write those marketing strategies, product strategies, et cetera. They need to have those skills around business innovation, what I call listening to the market, how to understand and identify market opportunities. These are fundamental skill sets that business owners, I find, across the board, often many of them either don't have it all or seriously lacking. And that is fundamental in being able for any business owner to be able to know how to meet moving forward. So they need that access to the education and that skill set, which ties into something else that Jocelyn also raised around funding, because there's a lot of rhetoric, quite honestly, I hear about, business, small businesses, you need to go and get advice, have an accountant, you should have a business consultant, and you need to have that advice so you know what to do, how to grow. Well, that takes money. And so where is the money are they going to be able to get that level of advice and support to help them develop and create the business plans, the marketing plans, and to be able to execute on that. You can get lots of free information on the internet. You can listen to the webinars till the cows come home, but being able to listen, but able to translate, to do what you need to do for your catering business, your physio business, your engineering firm, you need that advice and support, which free will only take you so far. Products and service providers, those consultants, graphic designers, and specialists that the small businesses need will do the free education and advocacy to a point. There needs to be funding available either to the businesses, small business owners directly, so that they can get that level of advice, support, input that they need. Or you need to provide some remuneration to consultants and the service providers so that they are able to provide that level of support and that higher level of involvement to really help move the dial for the small businesses, because these small business owners, consultants, advisors, they've got bills to pay. They're trying to move forward. You know, you can only do free for so much. So there's an education component and a skills development component that's required, but there's also the requisite funding that needs to go into this, both for the business owners, and I'm going to say as a consultant and advisor myself, as to those that are service providers supporting small business as well.
And before you, David, ask another question, I just want to really hit that message home that Michael said, because I was thinking it too. If there are investors or corporations that are thinking, how do I help? Perhaps create a circular system where the small business professional services are being paid to help small businesses that need those professional services. And now you have two groups benefiting from your investment. And so it could be, like you said, lawyers, accountants, graphic designers, website builders, those should all be small businesses, and then connect them to those businesses that need those services. That would be a beautiful program. Yeah.
It's a fabulous idea. By the way, I should just simply bow out and not ask questions, just let you guys go back and forth, because this is absolutely fascinating and incredibly valuable. And I think what you're describing is a little bit, it would be akin to scholarship. You know, it's comparable to, let me provide a small business the funding that they need to get the kind of help and education that they need within the context of a program that really is intended to help them get on sure footing. I want to unpack a little bit, Jocelyn. We were talking about systemic barriers that exist for many small businesses who may have the ambition to think bigger, to dream bigger, but are facing a lot of these practical barriers, these things that really prevent them from being big. And Michael, you can be thinking about this, because I want to ask it from your perspective as well. What are some of those barriers, and are those barriers inevitable barriers? Are they barriers that need to be torn down simultaneously to other social barriers? What's your perspective on how we really systemically address those barriers?
Yeah, and I want to share like a vision that I always think of when I have this conversation about barriers, because I think some people see this as a burden to help others by removing barriers, but it's sort of like, if we're a team, maybe a football team, we have great players sitting on the bench that we could put in the game if we just gave them a helmet and, you know, the necessary equipment so that we all can win the championship. It's not just so they win, we all win. And by doing this, we help ourselves. So I think that's part of, when I think about barriers, it's not just a handout. It's really, one, about right-sizing something that's been incorrect for a long time, where resources weren't flowing equitably across the landscape for a lot of Americans. And this happens in other countries too. But also it's about helping yourself by making sure your team is a winning force. And so when I think about what those barriers are, they're the things that people are very familiar with: the capital, the flow of funding. Even though we've, again, talked about how much money has been released, I think there's a data point that says $1 trillion in government funding came through the pipeline in 2020, but less than, so much less of it went to Black-owned businesses than white-owned businesses. And so there are many reasons that happens, but it's that infrastructure that creates that initial barrier. The other thing that we've been talking about in this conversation is not just access to education, but right-size education at the right time, because there is so much out there. And as a small business owner, which I am as well, it's a lot to navigate. It's like, which of these courses I have to make money today, and I could go sit in this course that may not be the right course for me, impeding my ability to make money, and impeding my ability to grow my business. So I think if we could reduce the challenge of finding the right resources to grow your business, that would go a long way. I still think that not everybody should be an accountant. Like, if I'm a baker, why would I try to be an accountant? That's not stay in my lane. So why can't I have an accountant that specializes in accounting that can help me at my level? And that's also a hard, there's not enough matching going on there. And so the education, and then those that are trying to serve small businesses, what we call business support organizations and CDFIs, they also have a lot of fragmentation in their own network, and they're under capacity. They sometimes don't have enough resources. Those that are providing lending, like the CDFIs of the world, don't have enough ability to give out loans at the lowest possible cost. And so there are things there that we could easily do. If you're someone who's like, okay, I want to donate money, consider giving it to a CDFI who can use it multiple times over. And if you give it for free or at very low rates, they don't have to, it doesn't cost as much for them. So those are some of the things that corporations and others can do that can help alleviate some of these barriers. But then those CDFIs and those business support organizations also need help with their own capacity so that they can deliver across the spectrum and communities that they try to serve. So those are really the three top things. There's obviously a lot of policy change that needs to happen. I won't even go into that. But okay, so policy change, capital, support for the business support organizations like Michael and others that have what it takes, but also could expand in their capacity to serve. And then that navigation of the education and access to customers. So Michael talked about that, so I'm gonna bring that back up. Like, if I knew where to reach customers, I could sell more of my stuff. I could provide more of my services. So these are things that we could easily alleviate with some concerted effort and teamwork on the side of those that serve small businesses.
So, Michael, from your perspective, what are some of the barriers as someone who advises small business and strategically and tactically how to position themselves for success? What are some of the impediments that you see?
So the impediments are ones we've touched on. I would say around the education and knowledge in terms of the specific kinds of skills that business leaders need to have. And so, they need to have in-depth skill and knowledge of certain areas such as strategic marketing. Marketing, I have a love-hate relationship with that term marketing. I have an MBA in marketing strategy. That is the foundation of how I work. But there is a whole misunderstanding of what marketing is. True strategic marketing means you're customer-driven, you're market-driven. So you know how to understand and identify the needs, trends of the industries, markets, and customers that you serve. So you know how to gather that information, that feedback, how to maintain an understanding, and then how to translate that into developing your products, your services. Then there's a notion of selling, and selling, for example, from a B2B standpoint has changed dramatically. So there really is a whole gap, a massive gap that I'm seeing fundamentally across, and I think it's international in terms of that lack of those fundamental skill sets around strategic marketing, which is where I call listening, that whole skill set, how you translate into strategies, business innovation, the skills around business innovation. And so by business innovation, how do you make those incremental and or major improvements across your products, your services, your marketing, your systems, and your processes? Many SMB owners and leaders I talk to really have no understanding and concept of what business innovation is. They think about innovation must mean technology, new invention. But when I start talking to them around these other elements, they're like, oh, wow. And then when they link that with what their market and customer needs and opportunities are, then they're like, wow, Michael, there's a whole set of opportunities there. So there's a need for the knowledge and the right kinds of specific skills that are needed, because there's a fair amount that's needed now, given how competitive and so crowded the marketplace is. So that's one thing I think is required. This goes back again, and funding's going to come back to it as well, because you need to have the knowledge and the skills, you need to have the support, you need to have access to the people on your networks. They say your network is your net worth. Well, getting access, communities are increasingly coming around. We see online communities, masterminds, and they say, getting access to those can make all the difference. Well, more and more now, you need to have money to be able to get into those online communities, into those mastermind groups, which can give you those opportunities to connect with the experts, to get access to that VP of that company, to give you the opportunity for those new projects and stuff. So again, there's a whole funding money component that is quite critical, so that small business leaders can get the knowledge, getting the knowledge they need within their organizations, so they can get access to the groups and those communities, which will give them more skills, more referral opportunities, etc. So it's knowledge and skills that are specific and required. And I think the fundamentals around strategic marketing, business innovation, and sales are the three key areas. But then it's getting access to funding to be able to getting access to those communities, experts, etc. So it comes back to knowledge and skills and money. That's really, from my perspective, the two things that need to happen. Because you can't get access. It's more and more competitive to succeed in small business, and you need to have the right tools. You have to be able to stand out. You have to have the knowledge. You have to have the connection, and all of those things require money now. These simple advice about, well, go and speak. Well, you want to get a speaking opportunity now? More and more now you have to pay. You want to be at a conference now or a trade show? You have to pay. So, a lot of the solutions that the experts dole out on these, listicles that they've been putting out while we're working from home takes money.
Right.
Pivoting from offline to online, that takes money, because for every small business to go online now, you must have search engine optimization so you can be found. Search engine optimization is quite expensive. It's $800 to $1,000 a month. It is becoming a part of doing business that most small businesses must do. But again, it is money. So it's knowledge and skills, and then having the funding to give you access to the skills and support that you need.
So, I want to frame that because I'm hoping we can kind of pivot into now talking to our audience, which is made up of brands and leaders in this large enterprise community that serves small businesses. You're speaking to them, and what would you say to them based on what you've just each described as impediments, what's needed, barriers to be lifted? What would you say to them? Hey, here's what you really need to do. If you genuinely want to help, here's what I suggest you really focus on. And I'll start with you, Jocelyn, because you work with a lot of these large companies in kind of helping them figure that out. What are the things that you would tell them to do?
Yeah, I'm glad you pivoted this way, because this is exactly what I want to talk about. So there are two things that come to mind. One is make a better plan for, if you plan on earmarking money or resources, work with those that are closest to the community. There's an article by New Profit called, it talks about proximate leadership. So if you Google proximate leadership in New Profit, Tulane Montgomery is one of the CEOs there. You'll find this article, I think it's on a website called ssir.org. And it talks about those that are closest to community, and it redefines what it means to be close to the community so that people are clear that these are the people that actually know what is needed by those being served. Sometimes the solutions that are being created and spun up are being done in a vacuum, and they're not really pulling from what small business owners say they need, and where the true gaps are. So that's just a big thing that I feel like before you embark on spending $1 million, or giving up your salary, or all of these things that happened in 2020, pressure test your plan with actual small business owners and those that are in the community and those that serve the community that you're trying to reach. But the other more specific thing that I think Michael's going to love is, I want to see, there's a lot of talk around contracting, procurement, and supplier diversity. And I want to see more happening there at every company. If you do business, I don't care if it's where you buy your paper plates from, or you hire your consultants, you're doing business with other businesses. And how intentional are you being about spending money with small businesses and diverse businesses? And a lot of people put out a supplier diversity effort or some initiative, and they're struggling to move the needle past 2% spend or 4% spend, especially a lot of the big anchor institutions, hospitals, schools. Those anchor institutions are called anchors because they are anchoring communities. And if you're in a community where you're not even spending money with that community, and you're doing giant landscaping deals and construction deals and who you're buying your materials from, you're missing an opportunity right there to serve. And again, not a handout, you're providing a channel and access to do business with your business. One of the challenges there is some of the small businesses that could benefit most are not the ones that can be tier 1 or prime suppliers, so the first point, but they could be second tier suppliers or work at that second, so they work with the main supplier and they are contracted in that way. And there could be more work done for business owners. So if you're a major corporation, are you challenging your tier one suppliers or your prime suppliers to meet a certain threshold as far as supporting the community, supporting small businesses, or supporting diversity in how they hire and contract the work that you're giving, that they're earning from you? I shouldn't say given, they're earning it, but are they then contracting with smaller businesses in a way that helps create a nice life cycle in the communities, again, that you serve? I think there's a lot of work that could be done there. I was talking to one of the major automotive companies, and they were saying that they want to do an effort to bring their tier ones to the table, because when they go to conferences and they have their table set up, their tier one suppliers are right across the hall, and all of the small businesses come rushing to the table because they understand that brand. They know, they've seen the brand. They don't know the tier one name brand, or they're not familiar. They don't even know that brand does business with this major company. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lack of knowledge for small business owners or medium-sized business owners even, who wouldn't know how to even get to or who those tier ones and primes are, to say, hey, I wanted to do business with XYZ major corporation, but I'm not yet there, but I could do business with you. And so that is something I would love to see corporations and anchor institutions and the government do, is put some emphasis and maybe scrutiny on your first force of suppliers to help them grow the amount of dollars and revenues being spent with diverse and small and local business owners.
I think it's an incredibly powerful point. You know, the real power that enterprises have is their purchasing power. And if they can effectively channel that purchasing power towards small businesses, they could make an enormous impact. And then, of course, pay their bills. That's another challenge. Michael, from your perspective, what would you say to these large companies?
Really building on what Jocelyn said, I think for big corporations to provide those opportunities for small businesses to be able to engage on different kinds of projects and be a product service provider, and having that tiered is very important. But I'm going to take it one step further. These big corporations got lots of money, they got access to people. I almost think they really need to be driving the small business community, in the sense ecosystem, in terms of bringing together, as Jocelyn brought out, having starting off with an advisory board, bring some of these big companies together, getting some representatives from a small business advisory level, from small businesses directly, and how to create an ecosystem to enable to get that skill education and skill enablement within small businesses, helping to generate opportunities within those companies to start doing that initial project, that initial contract, to facilitate those introductions. I think big business, big corporations should be banding together, because they have access to the money, the resources, the tools, etc., to help create this ecosystem, this community, I'm going to say, with small business input. So we need to have some small business advisors, some small businesses on that seat on the table, but creating an ecosystem to facilitate the opportunity, not just for education, but for skills enablement, to start getting some of those opportunities happening within small businesses. I really think the large businesses can be used as a vehicle to create that ecosystem, to really start making some meaningful things happen, providing access to funding so that the small businesses can get access to funding, so they can go to the service providers to get the expertise that they need around strategy, accounting, etc. So yeah, that's kind of it. So it's Jocelyn's idea of let's start getting some initial initiatives, but I do think there needs to be this ecosystem, this advisory board with corporations heading, funding, with a strong involvement and small business at the seat of the table, to really start making things happen around that funding, education, creating of those opportunities. That's what I think needs to happen. And I'm putting it on the large corporations, because they have the ability to do so.
They certainly
Michael,
have the
this already exists. This already, sorry, David, but this already exists.
Does it exist? Okay, then we need to break it down.
Corporations aren't running it, but for instance, I'm involved in an ecosystem project right now in Philadelphia, and one of my colleagues is doing one in LA. We've done 25 of these things across the United States. But there aren't very many corporations at the table. And that, to me, that really is the point. It's like they are absent. And what you said about they need strong influence from the community. That's where this proximate leadership piece comes in, but also the folks that have already been doing the work should be at not only a seat at the table, really driving the dialogue. Yeah. So that's why I say the work is already being done. It just doesn't have the corporations present in the way that they should.
And that's key though, because they have the money, the influence, the access. Exactly. That's critical.
And I feel like that marriage would be powerful. Again, I can direct anyone who's looking because we're not the only ones doing this, but if you're looking in wherever your businesses are and you're looking for how can we get involved in some of the ecosystem work, I am happy to tell you, because we know where there's ecosystem work that's already operational. You don't even have to build it. You just get to come and be a part of it. How nice is that? It's already set up and you can add your influence. But this way, one of the concerns is, again, corporations are coming into this sometimes new. We're working with a major telecom company. They're doing some amazing things, but they're new to this. So I don't want to recommend that everyone goes in and spins up their own thing. First, check and see if something exists. And then you come in and be a support in a very humble and receptive way, acknowledging the work that's already being done, but supporting it again with the resources, money, and I would say the for-profit thinking that some of these nonprofits could benefit from while doing this work. But yes, there are tons of ecosystem initiatives, reports, research, data, groups, working groups, advisory boards that exist. And some of them are doing really great work. And so I would start there, is tap into some of the things that are already happening.
And just stepping back for a minute, do you think that large enterprises on the whole know what they can do, or are they just kind of they either don't know what's possible or they don't know what to do?
I'm going to be the cynic here. I'm going to be the cynic here and say I don't think it's on their radar. To be quite honest, I think it's minimal lip service, minimal attention that is being given to small businesses and the needs of small business. I'm going to be the cynic right there. There needs to be more concerted effort and focus. You know, they've got the power, the means, the money, the access to make things happen. I don't believe it's a high priority in the boardroom. It will come up when their small business segment is affected. It will come up and then they will turn to, oh, what's happening with small business? Oh, we've got to fix that. And then they'll put effort on that. That's how I got one of my first consulting gigs, because, oh, we need to fix our small business. But until it becomes on the radar affecting their financials, because that P&L for that customer segment is not doing well or there's opportunity, they don't give small business a lot of attention. I'm going to put it out there.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily cynical. Jocelyn, how would you, I know you're not as cynical as Michael is, but tell us, how would you assess how well corporations understand how they can actually help their small business customers?
Yeah, Michael hit the nail on the head as far as there's another report through Harvard by Michael Porter about shared value, which a lot of companies are aware of. This idea that you can do good and do well. And I think that some corporations have maybe gone out and said, we want to do a good thing, but it's, again, very surface level impact, because again, if you make sneakers, this isn't your line of work. You might need someone else to help you understand where and how to make an impact, because this is not your lane either. And so sometimes they've done things that look good from a brand standpoint, but again, aren't reaching the rooted level of the problem. And so this idea that I would say my optimistic view is corporations are making some effort. There's definitely things that have never happened before that happened in the last 2 years that were exciting to see. But if you really have sat back and said, okay, that was nice, but it's not creating sustainable change. It's not truly impacting the communities. It's just on our website, but nobody's calling us and saying, you changed my life. Then you need to partner with those that are closest to the work or organizations that have been doing it for a while that can provide you with the direction and guidance. And then that dollar that you spend will go so much further than just the PR. That's what we're really hoping for, is like, we're glad that I'm not mad. I worked at for-profit companies my whole life. I'm not mad at you making a buck. I'm not even mad if you're making that dollar off of small businesses. What I'm disgruntled about is if in your lip service to contribute or help, there's not actually an impact happening. So I'm okay with the shared value approach. I know a few companies that are really mindful and thoughtful about how they do this, but a lot of companies still need to do a deeper and introspective look on, are we actually creating an impact that's worthy of saying we serve the communities where we do business, which is usually what you see on everybody's website.
Well, I'll summarize, that in particularly in that first few months of the pandemic, and a lot of the dialogues I was having with the senior leaders of the organizations that we're talking about. And I will tell you that the awakening for them, for many of them, was how little they knew about what went into actually helping small business. Because what they've been trained to do and been very successfully rewarded for was selling, not helping. And I think that my good friend Stephanie Gorski, who runs the small business advisory unit for Accenture, says it wonderfully. One of her first questions to an executive team that she meets, that she's about to engage in a multi-million dollar consulting project, is, what do you do for small business? No, not what do you sell to small business, what do you do to small business? And second question, not how much do you sell to small business, but how do you help small business? And if you can refocus the organization into really framing everything in what do you do and how much does it help, it suddenly becomes very, very different. And the last thing I'll share with you is that for many of those executives at the end of 2020, what so many of them said, after in many cases spending enormous amounts of money on grant initiatives and on campaigns and programs intended to help small businesses and suspending all their subscription costs and all the rest, the way that one particular executive described it to me is, boy, we sure built a lot of bridges to nowhere. And it was
like that.
As disappointing to them personally and professionally, that all the things that they had done with really good intention, by the way, and I'm sure you guys observed a lot of stuff that was done with good intention, but let's be real, $100 million doesn't actually go very far with helping small business. It is going to take a collaborative effort in the billions of dollars that really helps. One would hope everyone would get the joke that if we help small businesses think bigger and achieve more, we actually benefit from that. They'll be in a position to buy more. It's not like it's going to be money poorly spent or poorly invested. And I'd hope you agree. I do want to circle it back to, because I think, again, you guys, fantastic conversation, and you delivered a wonderful component of this conversation of how to help small business think bigger, in the form of, well, listen, we need to think bigger first. That those of us who support small businesses really need to think bigger about what we can do and what we should do. Circle it back then into the again, maybe not to be repetitive, but what are those things that specifically small businesses need to sit around that table and think bigger about when it comes to small business? What can we actually do you think, collectively, to help small businesses? Tough question, sorry.
And just to clarify, do you want to dive into what we, as those that work in this space, or corporations, those that are trying to serve small business, what they can do? Or I also heard you sort of talk about what should small businesses be doing to think differently about their business. Which part would you like to tackle first?
Well, I'd love to tackle both. And I think, Jocelyn, you've raised a lot of points that I guess drive me to the question is, do small businesses recognize how collectively they can be very big, and they can have enormous influence, and they can have enormous impact? It's their fragmentation and the fact that, in a wonderful way, they're all snowflakes. They're a bunch of snowflakes that haven't figured out how to be an iceberg and how to really be a big, big thing as a collective group. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
That's an interesting perspective. And I could see where, like, let's say all the small business bakers got together and said, we are the small business baking force of America, and we need X. it would be so much easier for, let's say, if you were a spice company or a flower company, be like, well, look, here they all are. We can help them directly. This gets into my earlier point about more specific service solutions, but I do see where, as a small business owner, while that's a novel idea, they're very busy thinking about, how am I keep my business open? How am I going to, do this thing right in front of me? And to strategize on the larger scale of how can we become this collective force really would take one of the advocate probably organizations. And there are some small businesses that actually step out from their day-to-day work to say, hey, I want to help other small businesses. Again, we work with a number of them in Philly. And so I think that's the challenge, is where would small businesses carve out the time to do this collective bargaining and effort? And even if they could carve out the time, there's a lot of work there that it would maybe take to do that. I think it would be fantastic and give them a lot more leverage and allow them to be accessible and found for those that want to provide services.
I'd like to kind of jump in. I would argue, Dave, from what I've observed, I find a lot of small business owners, to Jocelyn's point, they're focused very much on the day-to-day. Getting them to think strategically, even about their own businesses, can be, I find, a challenge in and of itself. Getting them to think collaboratively, even about collaborating with another business in terms of, I'm very big on trying to promote collaboration and co-creation in terms of, okay, well, you're the marketing firm, you're the IT firm, you're both going after mid-market businesses. How can you join forces to get that next, big contract? Getting small businesses just even thinking strategically and start thinking collaboratively on a much more smaller level in terms of, how to, increase their revenues by 10, 20%. I think that's the first step we've got to get them to be doing. Because I find a lot of small business owners, because they're so focused on trying to pay the bills and get from one month to the next, that getting them to think strategically and getting them to think strategically in things like it's collaborating, co-creating with other partners, with their customers. That's one of the first things that they need to be doing in terms of if they want to improve, if they want to move forward, whether it be to have a sustainable business, where they want to grow or scale. They've got to start thinking strategically and devoting time to being strategic and making some of those initial initiatives. So I think in terms of that collective, that's something that definitely we have to aspire to. But I think it's getting them to think first about just, collaborating amongst themselves. Because from what I've observed, and I can only speak from my observation, that's something that's just often not on the radar of small business owners. They're still trying to grapple with, how do I move forward? Well, where are the opportunities for my business to sustain, to stay in business, and to move forward? They're still grappling with some of those things and opening their minds to how they can collaborate and do so at a smaller level. So I think there's some things around strategically from initial steps they need to be doing first before tapping into joining powers of force as a collective. But it's definitely something that I hope we can see happen in the not too distant future. But there's a few more immediate steps, I think, that need to happen first.
Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. And there's just so many things that you guys have talked about that are worthy of unpacking. And I hope we can come back and do this again and crack open some of those conversations even further. I guess I'll ask you to conclude with answering the question, are you bullish about the future of small business? I mean, Jocelyn, from the things that need to get fixed and the impediments removed, are you bullish on that, or are you cautiously hopeful? How would you describe your own kind of point of view on the future of small business?
I am cautiously hopeful, and I would say that hopeful is very enthusiastic. I think that there are enough people that realize that there's something that needs to be done, what you talked about earlier, like so many people didn't even know this was an issue. And people who want to give, philanthropic organizations and other, have now earmarked a lane or a line item for small business that never even existed before. So I'm really excited about folks and organizations and companies that are now including small business. Even when you look at supplier diversity definitions, it now not only includes all the ethnic and gender categories, it includes small business in some companies. So they consider that as just being a small business owner as a metric for them to support from a supplier diversity standpoint. So I'm really excited to see some of that. I'm excited by the new companies that are coming to Next Street that never before thought we should do something, and it's not driven. They're giving the work to professionals within their organization, not shackling them with a bottom line responsibility. And so
Right.
they're able to say, oh, I can spend this money or these resources and I don't have to, prove that we've hit some bottom line number. Thank you. And so that is really refreshing to see that that didn't exist in this form and in this amount before, that people are now being given responsibility. I think those people need more visibility, and there need to be more people higher up in organizations. So C-level people, VP level people, who that is their main job, because it does feel like it's off the side of the table sometimes. But I'm excited about what I've seen transpire. I would like to see it form deeper roots, and so that it has staying power. We tend to be a little bit of following a trend as a society, and my worry is that when this time passes, we go back to whatever we were doing before, and small businesses again never truly recover. So I really implore those that are on this call, that are paying attention to this, that are part of your organization, to come up with strategies that allow you to keep a rooted program in place and a rooted focus on this from the C-level downward, so that even if the society changes its focus, you stay the course.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Michael, from you, are you bullish?
I'm optimistic. I'm enthusiastic. I'm optimistic. The world of business is competitive, it's tough, and it's even becoming even more crowded. But small business owners, small business folks, we're resilient, we're tough, we'll move forward. And so there will be progress, things will happen. You're already starting to see, I've been observing myself, small business owners and teams that are really starting to think out of the box, being more strategic, being more innovative, more collaborative. I think we're going to see more of that. And those, I do think it's those that are going to be more strategic, more innovative, and that are going to rise to the challenge, that they will succeed. So I think small businesses are going to do very well. I do think, given the great resignation and all of that, there are some that are entering the world of small business that are somewhat naive. Because what it takes to build presence, to build your brand, to build a business, it's a lot harder than it was, even 5 years ago. So I do think for the true small business owners that do have that grit and also have that strategic nous, that innovativeness, that progressiveness, they will thrive and succeed. I do think there are a bunch of corporate escapees that are going to have a hard, rude awakening, because they think they're great at their job, that they'll be great small business entrepreneurs. And those are two very different things. But I'm very positive overall.
I can testify on that. I went from corporate to entrepreneurship in 2011 and spent the first year realizing how stupid I was.
Oh, me too. Yeah, you have to get some serious burns, and then you don't know so much, and then you have to have a few knocks, and then you start to get it. But a lot's changed since 2011. It's a lot tougher now. But yeah, those were the great strategic nows, and that progress, that mindset, they will thrive and succeed most definitely.
Oh, this has been absolutely terrific, guys. Thank you for being part of our community for the first time for both of you. So great to have you. So great to have your enthusiasm, your voices, such articulate and passionate advocates on behalf of small business, both of you. Thanks so much for doing this. Greatly appreciated. Michael, thank you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
And Jocelyn, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Great being with you too, Michael.
Thank you. Awesome.